Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome everyone to MMAC Tea Talk series. It's nice seeing you all here. I'm Fabi Neduvincheri, President of MMAC, Malayali Muslim Association of Canada. MMAC is a non-profit organization that caters to the needs of Malayali Muslims in Canada. To know more about our organization, our services, our programs, you can visit malayalimuslims.ca, our website. This is our second interactive session of Tea Talk series. And the topic for today is finding clarity in chaos. That's about COVID-19 vaccine. We all had some impact of COVID-19 in our life. We all were talking about COVID-19 for the past 1 year. It has created some changes in our life. And now it's time to know more about the vaccine that has been approved and getting rolled out. Today, we have with us Dr. Nisha Nigel, Assistant Professor of Medicine and Endocrinology at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine. She's an endocrinologist specializing in diabetes and osteoporosis. Her research areas include diabetes, osteoporosis, thyroid disease, and knowledge translation. She has won several awards, including the prestigious Graham Knowledge Translation Fellowship at PSI Foundation, Ontario. She is also the president of AKMG, Association of Carolite Medical Graduates, Canada. Apart from aiding with our session today, she has also heavily supported our COVID-19 relief initiative by answering queries and guiding a community through this pandemic. She consistently spreads awareness about the pandemic through social media platforms by providing regular updates. Welcome, Dr. Nisha Nigel, to the session. We also have Dr. Nilu Firoz, recently graduated medicine from the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and she's in the midst of writing her board exams and applying to master's program while awaiting acceptance into training program. She has a special interest in women's health, mental health, and public health. Dr. Nilu Firoz will be moderating the session. Welcome, Nilu, to the session. We would like to take this moment to appreciate our sponsors for this event, Manoj Karata, Remax Realtor, Chris Lamanel, Managing Lawyer at the Law Office of Chris Lamanel, Mustafa Becker, CEO and Senior Counsel at Cheve Immigration Law. I'll be handing over the Nilu to begin this today's session. And it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's an interactive QA session where we have got a couple of questions that it would be answered by Dr. Nisha Nigel. Hope this program will be beneficial to everyone. Thank you so much. Nilu, it's all yours now.
Hi, how are you? I hope everyone kind of knows my face.
Yes.
So I'm Nilu, and that's Dr. Nisha, or Nishanti as I call her. So we're basically doing a talk today on just dispelling some rumors about the COVID vaccine, what we know about it. Things are kind of changing every day. It's a very dynamic topic. There's a lot of information kind of circulating around. And so the idea behind this talk today is really to just bring a little more consistency to what everyone knows and give a more solid idea to what we actually know about the vaccine and how things are going to be rolled out and any other questions or concerns anyone will have. Me and Dr. Nisha were thinking that we could do this in a kind of more interactive way. If we could have everyone be on mute, and it'll be kind of like a bit of a back and forth between me and Dr. Nisha. And then if there are any questions or if people have comments or anything, you can use the raise hand function on Zoom and we'll pick you out and turn your mic on and you can ask a question, or you can chat it privately to me or Nishanti and we can discuss it from there on, if that's okay with everyone. Okay. Nishanti, do you want to get off of mute and then maybe introduce yourself?
No, I think thank you, Neelu. I think we are off to a good start. I will let you proceed with the first part of our presentation. So we're going to do it in an interactive format, as Neelu just suggested. ഞാൻ കുറച്ച് മലയാളത്തിലും കൂടി പറയാം, പകുതി ഇംഗ്ലീഷും പകുതി മലയാളം. പാടാണ് മെഡിക്കൽ ടോപ്പിക്സ് മലയാളത്തിൽ പറയാൻ. Neelu, I think mostly will be talking in English.
Yeah, my Malayalam is very conversational.
Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead, Neelu. Yeah.
Okay, one.
And I have to thank MMAC for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha.
Let me just pull up the presentation. Sorry for the blank screen. It's just prepping the slides for viewing. Okay. Oh, I am kind of funky looking. I apologize. I don't know how to fix this, but this is how I look apparently. So welcome to the presentation. Topic today is finding clarity in the chaos, and we're discussing the COVID vaccination. Sorry, the presentation's just acting up a little bit. See if it works now. Is the slide changing for everyone else, or is it just me?
No, not yet.
It's not changing, Anilo. It's just with the first slide.
Oh.
Can you try sharing again?
Yeah, I'll try. I'll stop the share and try sharing.
Yeah, just stop it and try again. It might come up.
See if I can do it. Is it working? Am I switching the slides?
No.
Okay, then I'm gonna do it the old-fashioned way.
Do you want me to try sharing your slides, Neelu?
I think I can do it.
Okay, go ahead.
I think I'm just gonna do it like the share screen and just get my page.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. There it is. Okay, fantastic. So hopefully this works better for everyone. You all can see this. So welcome to the talk. So today we're discussing this kind of transition from a lockdown and getting the vaccine kind of distributed amongst the public. So just questions and concerns that anyone might have about the vaccine, please feel free to bring it up. Just use the raise hand function and then we'll discuss. So first things first, there's a lot of information going around everywhere. I think one of the biggest things that we've been dealing with is an information overload, really, with all the information that we're seeing online from other people. There's so many sources, and unfortunately, there is nothing that we can do to stop the spread of fake news, really. So that's what me and Nishanti are here for, to discuss what we know to be the truth and to discuss what you might believe and figure out where the truth lies in all of this. So tons of places for us to be finding all of these rumors. WhatsApp, everybody is very familiar with. Facebook groups, Twitter, news sources even really can be kind of hard to trust. It really depends on where you're getting your news. You have to find credible news sources and places where things are really checked and there's references. They've actually done a lot of work with social media sites to stop the misinformation spreading. So Pinterest, for example, stopped allowing people to search vaccines. Facebook has stopped publicizing anti-vax groups and like posts that spread rumors. Twitter is doing a better job at trying to keep lies at bay. So if anyone is familiar with how Twitter works, you can get little bubbles show up on Twitter tweets that say, oh, this has some information. Make sure you double check your sources. Make sure you read these articles before you share them. So that's nice that these social media representatives are taking steps to make sure that lies aren't being spread anymore. A lot of this misinformation comes from conspiracy theories that people are trying to make money off of this, that there are political motivations involved. And unfortunately, it all boils down to a distrust in science and scientists who are really just trying to push what they know to be the truth out there. Not to, pat my own back or pat Nishanti's back here. So a couple of big topics, or about a couple of big things that spread about vaccines here that we should really just put to rest are that vaccines contain toxins. They do not. They have minute amounts of what could be considered toxins if we have them in larger amounts, but the amount that's in vaccines is safe. Vaccines can be delayed without risk. There's always a risk associated with delaying vaccines. That's something to consider, but we can discuss natural immunity and herd immunity and when to take the vaccine later on. Natural immunity through contraction of the disease is safer than the vaccination. When you talk about natural immunity and herd immunity, natural immunity tends to last longer for sure. And there's definitely some benefits to natural immunity that you can't get through vaccinations. But it's also something to consider that when you have the infection, there are certain long-term complications that you need to account for. And that's a risk that you need to consider before you say natural immunity is better than vaccination. Vaccines cause autism. That is probably the oldest rumor in the book. Actually, the study that published that was retracted, and the guy who published that had his license revoked. So that's completely false before that shows up, but I think most of us know that. So another couple things to touch on here. The dangers of the virus cannot be measured in death. That's something that we really need to talk about. The fatality rate is not a reflection of how dangerous this virus actually is. You have to also consider the burden that it puts on our healthcare system, on our doctors, on our frontline workers. These are all things that we need to think about when we say that the virus is not that dangerous and we only think about the deaths. You also have to consider the long-term effects of someone who has contracted the virus and whether or not they will completely recover from that. If anyone has been paying attention to the ICU capacity rates in the past couple of weeks, we've been pretty high, and you have to think about if you have someone who needs to be in the ICU, it's not only people that are contracting COVID and that need to be ventilated, but the ICU is kind of a very general place for anyone that needs intensive care. So people that are being monitored for organ transplant, car accidents, routine surgeries, anything really, like if they don't have space for them in the hospital, they can't be taken care of as well. So there's a certain social responsibility, I would say, that we have to protect ourselves from contracting the virus so that we don't burden the system. The mRNA virus will not alter your DNA. So that's not actually how mRNA viruses work. I have a fun analogy for anyone who is interested. The way that I kind of see mRNA vaccines and how DNA replication and all works, I kind of like to use this analogy of having an engineer in a bubble and an architect in a bubble that we call the nucleus of our cell. And that's where they write out the DNA, which is the nice big blueprint. So that blueprint is what we pass on to our kids. That's the DNA. That's the stuff that that is consistently replicated. The way mRNA works is it's more like the instructions that are passed on to people who work on site. So that's the stuff that leaves the cell, the nucleus, and enters the cell where it's produced, and what's produced is the proteins. So the way the mRNA vaccine works is it takes a little bit of the spike protein that's on the COVID virus. So the COVID virus is like a little bubble and it's got these little spikes on it. And the mRNA vaccine identifies the spike, which is the identifying factor, and it is put in our system through the vaccine, and our body creates an immune response to just that part. So you're not actually getting all the other nasty bits that are associated with the coronavirus itself, but you're getting just the part that identifies what the coronavirus is wearing, so that our body is aware of how to fight it off. So it doesn't alter your DNA, and you don't get coronavirus when you get this vaccine. No one from the trial has died, and vaccines do not contain microchips. I think the rumor with the microchips started because of something that was taken entirely out of context from what Bill Gates had said at some point in an interview or at a talk or something, but it was entirely out of context, and I think he was more so discussing the potential for vaccines to be tracked and traced. There's no microchips in vaccines. You're safe from that. Another couple things, make sure you check sources and when you're sharing information, and that when you're sharing memes and when you're sharing WhatsApp messages, these are all sources of news for a lot of people. And if we're spreading information, we need to know that what we're spreading is true, and we should be able to defend it if we come to be questioned about it. So all these slogans, these fun, cute memes, like it's very easy to say things like "Make America Great Again," but the meaning behind all of these things is the message that you're spreading, and you need to be careful with what you're spreading. So make sure that when you spread these things and when you say these things, that you say them with conviction and knowing what they mean. This is just a fun graphic on the 5 characteristics of science denial. People who we would consider fake experts, that magnify the minority. So you can get, especially I think in social media, you really see this a lot, where you have this little bubble that I call the echo chamber of social media. The point of social media is to keep us online, to keep us active, and to keep us interacting on the site. And so the way the algorithm kind of works is to keep you with information that they know that you will enjoy and that you will interact with and that you will read. So when you're on social media, you need to be really careful that you are getting this information from reputable sources, because it's just feeding you what it thinks that you will like. That's just the way that social media works. It's the way that it's programmed. It's just how it is. So that's why these discussions are kind of important, because it kind of gives you different viewpoints. It gives you different ways to see things, and it gives you different sources that you can look into. Some logical fallacies. So jumping to conclusions, things that we need to remember is that causation does not equal correlation. Just because two things look like they're related doesn't mean that they're caused by each other. I could have size 15 shoes. It doesn't mean that I have size 15 feet. I just own size 15 shoes, So that's kind of the idea. You have to remember that there are logical fallacies and things that we need to consider. Take things that you read online with a grain of salt, and make sure you verify it. Make sure that what you are reading, there is truth to it before you decide to believe it. So this is just a vaccine tracker screenshot. It's an older screenshot. So this is from January the 5th. Currently, this is just a little snapshot of what's going on, the vaccine candidates that are in line. So we've got about 23 vaccine trials that are in phase 1, 25 in phase 2, 15 in phase 3, 10 that are approved worldwide, and 2 that are currently approved in Canada. So this is a fun one. This is the rule of risk perception. I think it's important to consider that the risk, so this is a quote, this is a nice quote here, the risk that kills people and the risk that alarm them are completely different. There's a lot of fear surrounding the coronavirus and surrounding the vaccine. And I think it's very fair given the fact that it's kind of one of the first times in modern medicine, really, that on such a large and global scale, people are very unsure about what we know and things are changing so quickly. So it's very understandable to fear these things and to fear the unknown. But the risks associated with death from the virus versus the risks associated with, what makes you scared of it are very different. This is just some stuff on anti-vaxxing and how to advocate for everyone getting vaccines. So one of the first topics I'll touch on today is herd immunity. So I don't know if everyone remembers, but a little while ago, Boris Johnson was kind of ostracized a little bit politically for bringing up this concept of herd immunity and how he thinks that that there shouldn't be a lockdown so that the whole nation could develop a certain herd immunity to it, and then there would be protection to the whole nation. So yes, herd immunity is basically this concept that if everyone is immune to a certain virus, then we reduce the spread of the virus because no one can actually contract it. So there is truth to that, but it also comes at the risk of people contracting this virus and what effects that might have on their health in general. Vaccination will give you the immunity and it will take away the complications of getting the actual virus. So that is something that we should remember when we think about vaccines and getting the coronavirus vaccination. We need something like 70% vaccination to protect the community and to have herd immunity. So there is a social responsibility, I would say, to getting vaccinated. We'll talk about the rush with the vaccine and how quickly it was developed, because I think there's also a lot of fear surrounding that. But what I think really needs to be understood is that there is a large enough group of people that would be affected if everyone doesn't get vaccinated. There are people who are immunocompromised, there are pregnant people, there are children who can't get vaccinated, and there's a certain responsibility that we owe to other members of our society, I believe, that we should get vaccinated to protect them. Now, the vaccine itself is safe. We'll discuss that later. But again, with infectious diseases, there's a higher probability that you are also going to infect other people. So when you consider that, not getting vaccinated means that you have the ability to, even if you don't develop symptoms, pass it on to someone who could become very sick. And that is something that you need to think about. So here's just a image here to help understand the concept of herd immunity. So if you look at the image on the left, you can see the little blue guys are the ones who are immunized, and the little red guys are the ones who have the infection, and the little black guys are the ones that don't have any protection against the vaccine. So if you follow the arrows, you can see how the infection is being passed around, and you can see that the people who are immune, like they don't contract the virus, they don't pass it on to other people, but you can pass it on to people who aren't protected at all. And you can pass it to people who will then which will result in people getting the infection and becoming hosts, and also passing on the virus to people who are not protected. So here's another thing. So a lot of people that I've spoken to have also had this idea of, I'm not against the virus, or I'm not against the vaccine. I just don't want to be the first one to get it. I think that's a really common message that I've been hearing a lot recently. And I think that my response to that really has been that if you don't get the vaccine, then you delay herd immunity. So one, you kind of lengthen the time for us to go back to normalcy. And you also give the virus chance to develop new strains. So now we're already hearing about new strains coming up from the UK, from Brazil. And we know that it's very quick to develop. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the last thing I read was that the UK strain of COVID-19 is actually more infectious and more deadly than what we currently know, the virus that is more predominant. And if we don't have people immune quickly enough, then you delay herd immunity and you allow the next virus to come in, mutate, and spread. So this is just some numbers for coronavirus in Canada at the moment. We actually just crossed 2 million globally. And this morning I read a nice thread on Twitter about how we're projected to lose 6,400 people in the next 28 days because of the coronavirus. And that's just based off of numbers that we've been seeing up until now. It's 1 in 40 people, roughly 1 in 40 people who have been infected with the coronavirus in Canada since the start of the pandemic has passed away from COVID or COVID-related causes. So here's just a little snapshot of the agreements that we have with pharma companies for the vaccines. So we've got Moderna and Pfizer, which have been approved and are on the rollout right now. We've got some agreements with Sanofi, AstraZeneca, Janssen, Novavax. So we have, as you can see on the bullet, there's 20 to 76 million doses of each, should any of them successfully make it through the clinical trials and be approved by Health Canada with these companies. So Moderna and Pfizer are the ones that have currently been approved and are in distribution. The other ones are either still in trial or have yet to be approved by Health Canada. Another big question that has been asked is, did scientists and the government skip steps to rush vaccine production and approval? Yes and no. Yes, as in there were steps taken to rush the process, but no, we did not skip any steps, and vaccine production is still in the making. It's still happening. It's still going on. So, couple things. One, the messenger RNA technology used to make the COVID-19 vaccine is brand new. It's not. This research has been done behind this for many, many years. It's been in development for about 20, 30 years. If I'm not mistaken, the first use of the mRNA technology in vaccines was in '89. So we have a pretty decent amount of research in this topic. This same technology was used to develop this vaccine right now. So although we've had this vaccine technology with us for the past 20 years, the reason that it hasn't been used in a lot of other vaccines is that it's a lot harder to do, and it's just not economically feasible in a lot of cases when we have other alternatives. So in this case, mRNA technology was used because it made sense to, and we had global support, really. So here's just a little graphic on mRNA vaccine technology coming into play. So 1961, we discovered mRNA. As you can see, in 89, we had the first use of mRNA as a catatonic lipid-mediated mRNA transfection, so mRNA-based drugs. And here again, at the very end of this graphic, you can see in 2020, the conduction of phase 1 clinical trials of the vaccine mRNA 1723 against COVID-19. And that's just the publication, that's just the NCT number to follow the trial. So the use of mRNA for vaccines and treatment of diseases has been around for a while. So that's one of the main reasons really that this vaccine was developed so quickly. It's been used in animal models for various different infections, including Zika, rabies, CMV, which some mothers may have heard of, or some people who are familiar with infectious disease may have heard of. And it's also being considered for cancer treatment and cancer vaccine trials. There are over 70,000 doses that have been tested in phase 3 trials so far, and there haven't been any safety concerns. So we'll actually go through the different phases of clinical trials. I have a slide later on just to give people a better idea. The nice thing is that because this was such a global issue, there was a lot of support from people worldwide. There was a lot of support from people who wanted to be a part of the research, who wanted to contribute. So in that sense, when you have that global support, it makes it easier to find a solution to any problem, really. So companies began making vaccines very early in the process, even before it was approved by the FDA. So there were supplies that were ready to go when that paper was signed to say that it was good and safe for people to take. There were no steps skipped in the process of developing, testing, and approving the vaccines. All of the data that we have has been thoroughly reviewed and it has been closely inspected. You have to understand that there was very, very, very close collaboration with some of the greatest minds worldwide to try and find a solution to this virus spreading so fast and spreading worldwide. Usually clinical vaccine trials need about 6,000 to 8,000 people, but like the Pfizer vaccine trial and the Moderna trial both had over 20 grand people. So the numbers I think are just written there. So the Pfizer trial had over 45,000 people, where they had 22K who received a placebo or just saline solutions, just salt water, and 22,000 people who got the actual vaccine. And the Moderna trial had over 30,000 people. So these were huge trials that we're getting all of this data off of. And this data, when we have sure answers through data, then we know what works and what doesn't work. So phases of a clinical trial. So usually phase 1 is when you evaluate the safety of something, you determine what a safe dosage is, and you identify side effects. And that's where all the research is really done. Behind the scenes stuff. Phase 2 and phase 3 is when we start to trial it a little more. So phase 2, you're testing the effectiveness and further evaluating the safety. Phase 3, you're trialing it on humans and you are seeing if there's effectiveness to it. You're monitoring for human side effects. You're comparing it to other treatments and you're collecting data from what people are saying. And phase 4 is after approval. And that's when we start looking at the long-term side effects of a certain drug or a certain vaccine. So usually the preclinical stage is about 18 to 30 months. With the coronavirus, we really hopped into it quite quickly. We had whatever research we knew from before, and we implemented that as quickly as we can and jumped right into phase 1, where we had dozens of volunteers to help us to figure out if the vaccine would be effective. And this is just kind of a simple timeline to help picture where the time went with developing this vaccine. So as you can see, the real thing here is that we didn't have time as a luxury to figure this out, but we had the information and we had global collaboration to get this going and get this vaccine out there. So this is just a little infographic on the components of a mRNA vaccine versus a normal vaccine. So the mRNA is kind of just the simplified instructions to produce the protein. The production of it is faster because mRNA molecules are easier to produce than a traditional vaccine, where you are using the actual inactive virus or you're using a microbial protein, and it's slower and more difficult to produce. With regards to the process, the components in an mRNA vaccine are injected right into the arm, and it basically just shows us the identifying part of the virus so that our body learns to respond effectively to it. And it's the same with any other, just the same with any other vaccine. So again, this is just another infographic on how vaccine production usually goes. But just because of the global impact of all of this, this is how it went for us with coronavirus. So you can see I'm flipping back and forth between them now. So usually there's not a lot of overlap. All these steps are they're quite distinct, and there's a very stepwise sort of format to it. Whereas with the coronavirus vaccine, there was a little bit of overlap. We were building factories for virus production before things were even approved, and manufacturing what we knew to be somewhat effective before it was entirely approved by the FDA and other health authorities. And now we're currently in distribution and certain levels of approval in some. So here's another myth that has been going around. The COVID vaccine was developed with controversial substances. So the first two vaccines contain mRNA and other normal vaccine ingredients. They don't contain fetal tissue, and they don't contain any other materials such as implants, microchips, or tracking devices. Vaccines do work. We know them to be very effective. Anyone who has kids knows that they all get vaccinated for a reason. They're being protected against things that we know to be extremely harmful. So you have, for example, there are certain public health guidelines that people have to follow with getting vaccinated. Like, you can't be in a school setting if you don't have your MMR vaccine or if you're not immune. So vaccines work in not spreading viruses and not spreading infection. This is just a slide discussing what the contents of the vaccine are. So the Moderna vaccine does not contain mercury, formaldehyde, aluminum, or any fetal cells, and neither does the Pfizer vaccine. I think there were some questions as well about whether or not the vaccine was halal. There are no pig products in the vaccine. I've been seeing that around a lot as well. But I'll pass it on to Nishanti now to do the next half of the presentation. Nishanti?
Okay, so am I audible? Can we move on to the second part? Thank you, Neelu. That was a fabulous presentation. I'm really proud of all the young folks who are stepping up to help with the combating misinformation. And Neelu, as we all know, she's very well read and always up to date with current information and things that are happening in the world. She's a great resource, literally for everything under the sun. Thank you, Neelu. And we will move on to my presentation. I think we can take questions at the end of the talk. So I'm trying to do it in a slightly different format. Let me see if it'll work. I need a couple of minutes before I can download my slides. Probably we can take a couple of questions while my slides are loading. And ഇതിനെ പറ്റി doubts ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഇപ്പം maybe we can take two questions. എന്തെങ്കിലും ചോദിക്കാനുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ please feel free to.
Auntie, I have a fun list of questions that actually Amina had passed on to me earlier. Maybe you could shed some light on some of them, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
So I think some of the main concerns that a lot of people have been having are what type of side effects are you meant to expect after getting the vaccine? And also those reports about some more serious side effects like Bell's palsy and gallstones, etc.
Okay. So we will be discussing that in my presentation. Okay. Okay. So shall we go ahead? Okay. So whatever information I'm going to talk, so you have to, when you're listening to a speaker, if somebody is throwing in their own opinion, സ്വന്തമായിട്ട് വന്നിരുന്ന അഭിപ്രായം പറയുവാണെങ്കിൽ always be careful, because now we are almost 1 year into the pandemic and we have a lot of this information being confirmed and verified by reliable sources. അപ്പം എപ്പോഴും അത് കോട്ട് ചെയ്തേ പറയാവുള്ളൂ. ഇപ്പം നീലുവിന്റെ സ്ലൈഡ്സ് നമ്മൾ ശ്രദ്ധിച്ചാലും അതിന്റെ താഴെ എല്ലാം റെഫറൻസ് ഇട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട് ഞങ്ങൾ. സോ ദാറ്റ് മീൻസ് ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് നീലുസ് ഒപ്പീനിയൻ ഓർ എൻ്റെ ഒപ്പീനിയൻ അല്ല. നമ്മൾ അത് റെഫർ ചെയ്തിട്ട് സോഴ്സ് കാണിച്ചിട്ട് ക്രെഡിബിൾ ഇൻഫർമേഷൻ ആണെന്ന് കാണിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ്. സോ ഓൾവേസ് മേക്ക് ഷുവർ ദാറ്റ് even if you're listening to a conversation or something that is being discussed, unless this is Dr. Anthony Fauci polla alkara, because he works for that institution, and if this is someone outside of that platform, make sure that there is source verification happening at all levels. So adundana njan ivide ee slides selected, Center of Disease Control and Prevention, Health Canada, all these organizations now. So Neelu was just mentioning about two vaccines. So we have Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. So I think everybody is a vaccine expert now. There's so much information available through all sources. So I'm not going into the details. So cold chain issues are a concern. But storage, India vaccine room temperature April we might get Janssen and Janssen vaccine other room temperature transport chain storage flexibility the single dose vaccine. So you will see more products made available. Okay. So I see something in the chat. Sorry. Okay. So I will go on. I will do everything in English. So I have a request on the chat. Okay, so we have to acknowledge that vaccines do work, and as we go into from winter to spring, we will see more evidence. We can be really confident that we're going to see efficacy data in real world. So far, we have only seen efficacy data based on clinical trial data, and the projection is that, let's say, Ontario long-term care residents are being vaccinated first. So let's say even at the next stage, when you accelerate these vaccines, you can actually prevent 115 deaths in long-term care. So vaccines do work, vaccines prevent death. So these are very important messages. And I also want all of you, because the reason that you have all logged in today is that you're probably aware, and I think 99% of the folks who are here today are willing to take the vaccine. You're not concerned. We are not concerned about vaccine hesitancy in you folks. You're just here to clarify some doubts, right? So your job from today's discussion will be to go reach out to the communities and other platforms and workplaces that you can engage people, educate them, spread the correct information. So I'm pretty sure most of us are already to line up for the vaccine. So, the one of the common themes that come up when we talk about vaccine is that I'm not likely to die of COVID, or I'm not likely to get a severe disease, right? So, and the one of the mysteries that we had initially was that why do only some people get sick, right? Why do some people get away with having little or no symptoms? But mind you, these are the people who are more potentially. These are also people who can get reinfection, because with a mild infection, you don't get a rapid vaccine, robust immune response in the body. So because you just had a mild response, and some antibodies were produced and they might wane. And of course, there is talk about T cell immunity on all that, but this is really a concern about reinfection. So some people are genetically, or they are blessed with having a rapid immune response that can conquer the virus, and some people have pre-existing cross-reactive immunity to exposure to other coronavirus illnesses. And of course, genetic factors come into play, whether you catch a cancer or you are at risk of getting certain type of cancer, getting certain type of diabetes or other autoimmune conditions. So a lot of this is mediated by genetic factors. Of course, there are environmental factors and dietary factors that can be modified, but genetic factors are a big force here. And some people get viral infection. When they get the viral infection, the exposure is from a low viral load source, or you're wearing a good mask, and the exposure, the viral load is less, so that might give you some protection as well against a severe disease. Now, so as we just saw from Dr. Nilu's presentation, so this was actually, we had this information available even in 2018. This was a much talked about discovery in the vaccine world. Same excitement as Elon Musk talking about his Tesla car, or self-driving cars, or robotic kitchens. And we already knew there was a lot of technological advancement happening in that field. So Nature is the most advanced scientific publication, well-regarded scientific publication in the world. So this was the fact that it made it to Nature publications itself. This was touted as a path-breaking discovery even in 2018. So we had this technology available. Now, coming back to the vaccine trials, I have to thank these thousands of vaccine volunteers who participated in these trials, in the Pfizer trial and also Moderna trial. So these were the number of people, but 50% of them were on placebo. So 15,000 people received vaccine in the Moderna trial, and more than 20,000 people received vaccine in the Pfizer trial. So we have to really thank these clinical trial volunteers. And this was I'm not going into the specifics. For Pfizer, you have to get 2 doses, and with Moderna, again, 2 doses, 2 to 4 weeks apart. So that's the dosing interval they're talking about. And the efficacy is, the scientific world is really excited because of the efficacy data. Flu vaccine, the efficacy is only about 50%, but in this case, we are seeing up to 95%, which is very, very encouraging. And the efficacy data was somewhat similar even in seniors, but mind you, we might see slightly lesser efficacy in the real world when these vaccines are being rolled out to community folks. And there were 5% of individuals in these trials from Asian descent, and 20% of them were Hispanics and African Americans. 50% of them were female, so we can be reassured there was no gender discrimination there. And 25% of the people in these trials were 64 or older. So this vaccine has been tested in seniors. Okay, so the clinical trial started in July 2017, July 2020, end of July. And the Moderna trial was conducted solely in USA, whereas the Pfizer trial was conducted across USA, Germany, and certain other countries. And these vaccines are being manufactured in Belgium. Okay, now if you want to think that I want to be the first person in Ontario to be vaccinated, or maybe I want to be the 1,000th person, sorry, you are very, very late into the game. Already in Canada, 2 million people have been vaccinated, and Israel is leading the world. So more than 35 million people in Israel alone are vaccinated now. 25 million in United Arab Emirates, and other countries are catching up soon. So literally millions and millions of people have been vaccinated already. And one of the other themes that constantly come up is, I don't need a vaccine because I just sit at home and I'm not at risk. COVID-19 is not that bad. It's just a flu. I think Nilu briefly touched upon, but when you look at American data, in the last 30 days, their daily death rates was averaging around 3,000. So 30 times 3,000, we're talking about 90,000 deaths in a month. This is not a small number. Okay. And most of it was unavoidable death. And then, several magnitude or several probably thousands of people have gone through COVID in the last month. And many of them, I actually gave a presentation on long COVID syndrome this morning. Many of these people are going to have hospital readmission, prolonged hospital stay, and also long COVID diseases, probably late onset metabolic complications and things like that. So this is definitely a serious disease. Even if you have a mild infection or moderate infection, you're not getting hospitalized, there can be other complications potentially. In Canada, in general, the flu kills roughly 3,500 patients per year, but in less than a year, we have had 17,000 deaths. So again, this is data. This is how the mortality is going up in the United States. In India, we do see the curve flattening now, but total death is 400,000. In India, 150,000. In Canada, it's actually 18,000 as of today's data. This is as of 5 p.m. today. So this is the American data that I was talking about. Now, even if a young and healthy person doesn't die of COVID, there are long-term complications, including, I have only listed a couple of things, but there are many more long-term complications being predicted. And also, it might affect your quality of life and, mood, side effects, depression, cognitive effects, memory, chronic fatigue syndrome, etc. And the other thing is, let's say your parents are vaccinated, you still have, you've not vaccinated, or your grandparents or somebody, you're vaccinated and your grandparents are not vaccinated. So you still have the risk of getting the disease from somewhere else in the nasal cavity. You might not get a severe disease, but you might transmit it to others. Nilo briefly touched upon. So you're actually helping to protect the people around you. So all of us need to be vaccinated when it is offered to us. Again, we humans, we do not have the enzymes to convert this RNA into a DNA. So there is no way this is going to affect our genetic code. Okay, and our cells, and this mRNA is eventually degraded in the body itself. So you will not see this staying in the body for long. And now the vaccine itself cannot give you disease because there's no virus particle in the vaccine. It's just a genetic material, RNA. So, and we don't get the disease just by taking the virus. And then we did hear many people, probably 20 to 30 people in Norway dying right after the vaccination. But mind you, even if you take the vaccine on Monday, it takes at least 2 weeks from the second dose to get full protection. So you are still in that window period where you're still vulnerable to get the infection. And there have been reports of some same day deaths happening in very elderly and frail individuals, but these are people who are otherwise very, very sick. Probably, let's say they have a high grade fever after getting the vaccine and have had, these are very, very frail, otherwise sick individuals. So probably because of the very strong immune response, and some people, they might have had some reaction. So that is being checked. But in Norway itself, 20,000 seniors have received the vaccine. So these numbers are not very alarming. And also 400, in that very elderly population, 400 people die almost every month or so. So the numbers are pretty high in that sense. So again, Neelu also mentioned about correlation versus causality. So we'll get to know more about that. Again, no big concerns there. So you probably, even if you took the vaccine on Monday, you were probably exposed from your workplace or going to the grocery store 2 days before. So that disease might manifest as infection a day later or 2 weeks, 2 days later. So it's not the vaccine induced problem. It's actually the coronavirus disease itself. When you're trying to differentiate, make sure that if you have a lot of, respiratory symptoms like cough and shortness of breath, it's actually the disease itself. Whereas if you're just having some body pain and fever right after the vaccine within 2 days, it's actually the vaccine side effect or vaccine reaction, not side effect. So that's a good thing. But if you also have cough and shortness of breath, don't think that it's just the vaccine. You have to get medical attention. Okay, so don't get misled by that. Now, as I mentioned, you don't get immediate protection after the first dose. So full protection is 2 weeks after the 2 weeks after the second dose maximum. That is when you see 100% efficacy, and the curves of placebo versus vaccine start to diverge within 2 weeks of the first dose. So that's when you start to expect some change in flattening of the curve. So we're already starting to see. This is data from Israel showing that on day 14, the number of cases in the vaccinated population are definitely down. And this is in the non-vaccinated populations. This is a graph that is diverging at 2 weeks from the Pfizer data, where you start to see the separation of curves in vaccinated people versus non-vaccinated people. This is exactly the mirror image of what we are seeing in real world. Very strong, encouraging data from Israel too, that show that actually tells us that vaccines do work in real world. Efficacy might differ slightly. Okay. So, and then there are not enough vaccine. Of course, more and more Canadians are getting vaccinated, and more people, so millions of people will get the vaccine, and you're starting to see more rare side effects. So again, the side effects are extremely rare. And so I'm going to skip a couple of slides. I know there are questions, so most of this will be covered through my presentation, and then probably in 15 minutes we can go ahead with the Q&A session. So there is also some concern about religious beliefs. This has been debunked by various religious organizations, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, and council. So you don't have to have any major concerns. As I mentioned, if we vaccinate 10 million people, these are random associations. These many number of people randomly have all these problems on an average of 2 months. So that's just a random thing. It's not related to the vaccine. And we're going to focus on these specific subgroups. I'm pretty sure I'm expecting questions. So I think we will cover this as we go along. Children, as of now, are not getting vaccinated because we didn't have trial data, but they were not a priority initially, but eventually children will be offered the vaccine pending safety data and efficacy data. The trials are ongoing. Previously, they didn't focus, but mind you, children do get this multi-system inflammatory disease, which can be a severe consequences. And children are thought to be important transmitters of COVID disease. So again, that's why we might have to vaccinate them. And we also feel safe when they are vaccinated, sending them to children into schools. Okay. Again, this is what the data in Ontario, actually, sometimes there is community spread in children as well. So they are not totally protected. Although they don't get severely ill, there is transmission happening in children. Yes, so right now the age cutoff is 16 to 18, depending on the type of vaccine. Older people, as I mentioned, were included, and fewer side effects in older people. So that's encouraging. And again, the efficacy is kind of same as we know from data available. And of course, the vaccines have been tested in people of color. I'm going to skip that. Vaccines in general, although people with advanced cancer, different types of cancer were excluded from the trials, but cancer associations have been assessing this data. And the general recommendation is to go ahead and vaccinate people who have cancer, unless they are in different phases of chemotherapy. So there will be specific guidelines about timings, but all the organizations have put people with cancer as priority groups for being vaccinated because they are at high risk of dying from COVID. Now, immunocompromised, I did see some questions about autoimmune disease. We'll come to that. So again, pregnant women, the general recommendation based on trial data is that pregnant women were not included, but in Pfizer trial, around 23 people got pregnant. So there were no side effects noted, but they have been excluded in trial. But generally, all the gynecological associations are now encouraging, especially when there is community spread. Pregnant women are encouraged to have an open conversation with their practitioner, have a risk-benefit assessment, and generally it is being deemed safe in pregnancy and also in breastfeeding women. And in both trials, we saw there were few women getting pregnant, and then Moderna and Pfizer trial, there was a small study in animal rats, and there were no concerns in the offspring. So animal studies look for promising. Again, there's absolutely no scientific evidence to suggest that the vaccine can cause infertility in women. This has been debunked by FDA and other authorities as well. The reports in social media were falsely asserted that vaccine could cause infertility. Absolutely no scientific plausibility about that. This has been debunked. There's also a lot of talk about this protein and interacting with the COVID vaccine and all that. Absolutely no. And you can access more information from these websites too. So again, when you go to the actual vaccine center, they'll ask you about prior history of allergy, polyethylene glycol, and other substances. All these information will be collected, and then you can have they will assess you for other risk factors before giving you the vaccine, so you can be reassured. And persons with autoimmune conditions also, depending on the type of disease, severity of the disease in general, there is no concern about vaccine safety in this population, so you can definitely get vaccinated. And Bell's palsy, this question had come up, and it comes up because of the media scare that's happening. 4 cases reported in the Pfizer trial. Again, there's no causal association. There's no long-term concern at all. It has been debunked. And FDA, so in order to see such strong statements coming from FDA, they have to have good evidence. So otherwise, they'll not put up a statement like that. So it has been looked at, and long-term, with millions of people being vaccinated, the background incidence of Bell's palsy is kind of matching with what we see even even people without vaccine, people with diabetes generally sometimes get Bell's palsy. These are common conditions otherwise happening. We are all familiar. So again, no causal association at all. So among 4 cases among 22,000 vaccinated people, and these 3 cases occurred within 1 month after both doses were completed again. And of course, the surveillance is going on. There will be data updated. Even people with prior history of Bell's palsy, if they're at high risk of COVID, they're encouraged to get vaccinated. So talking about side effects, we always, if you look at this slide, hepatic injury, serous, you Google this, serous allergy, hypersensitivity, nausea, vomiting. You know what? These are actually side effects of Tylenol, not COVID vaccine. So you will see all this information. So the vaccine itself is a very safe product. And in the Moderna trial and the Pfizer trial, there's less than 1% have side effects. But by side effects, they mean just mild fever. Nobody was prevented from continuing with their day-to-day activities. These are minor treatable side effects like fever, body pain, and headache. So in looking at, as we speak, 4,000 people in the American states are dying. So if you look at the risk-benefit ratio, these are minor ignorable side effects. Again, fever, 4%. So mind you, sometimes we see more stronger reaction and fever with the second dose because body is building up more immune response, which is actually a good thing. And you just have to, take a Tylenol. Don't take Tylenol before going for the vaccine. Don't take any antihistamines because sometimes the immune response can be suppressed. So it's better to wait. And then, these are the common, these are actually reactions to expect, and it will settle. Nothing to worry there. And yes, side effects, the strong immune reactions can be expected after the second dose. And allergic reactions, we have actually now have these allergic reaction data from the Pfizer trial published in established, well-respected medical journals. Extremely rare side effects. The risk of anaphylaxis, where that's when, it's like a fatal condition where, your lips swell up, you stop breathing, you have choking, you have to take the epinephrine immediately. So that risk itself was 0.0005%. It's completely treatable. But if you look at the overall average death risk from the COVID-19, it's 0.08% based on Ontario data. And it's like 1,600 times higher risk of death from natural COVID than anaphylaxis, which is treatable. So they'll observe you for 30 minutes if you've had a history of vaccine, or if you have a history of anaphylaxis or allergy. No. And then in the CDC itself has come up with data, anaphylaxis within 15 minutes. So people with allergies will be observed for 30 minutes. So it's an immediate reaction. So you will be safely. That's why you're not seeing vaccinations being rolled out through pharmacies yet. Mostly there are only supervised sites. In 1 million case, they saw 11. So it is that extremely rare. Okay. And the benefits definitely outweigh. I personally know my physician friends with history of anaphylaxis getting vaccinated because they know their risk of getting the COVID is definitely higher. Again, so there are specifics, so I will not go into this, but if anybody has questions, and you can be reassured that all these long-term concerns are being addressed and all the surveillance data are being collected. We've been administering this vaccine in various forms since July, so that itself is like long-term data. 2-year data will be collected amongst all trial participants, and there will be long-term surveillance system through Health Canada, FDA, and all international regulatory authorities. This is a highly regulated field. Okay, and so will it be safe? Again, I'm happy to take individual questions. And the other question is, if you've had COVID, yes, you should still be getting vaccinated. Wait for probably 90 days according to the current recommendation. In the UK, the recommendations are slightly different. Because the chance of reinfection is still there. So it's better to get vaccinated. And also vaccine gives you better and durable protection than the natural infection. You will find a lot of blog posts about, vaccine, natural infection giving you T-cell protection. Nobody knows. So, it's better. Our best bet is to depend on vaccine protection rather than natural disease protection. Okay, you must have heard about your friends and relatives receiving convalescent plasma or special monoclonal antibody treatment for COVID-19. Again, that itself, again, they say to wait for 90 days if you have received any of those, especially for Americans. And again, at this point, based on immunity to previous viruses, we might think that probably 2 to 3 years, promising data, or maybe, boosters at 1 year. We don't know that. I will not be able to make a good comment on that yet. Again, the variants too. Pfizer has done trials in in the lab and showing that right now the variants do not affect the vaccine efficacy, but the more it spread, you might see new variants emerging. So, there'll be a problem, then you'll have to tweak the vaccines. But the advantage with mRNA vaccines is that they can be easily tweaked. So it's not a big deal, but then we will have information. So far, from all sources, the data is promising. Okay. Yeah, so that is what the variant story is about. Pfizer has come up with a statement saying that it'll probably give protection. Again, this is a very important and most important slide. Don't be discouraged. Don't be attracted by sensational headlines, misinterpreted results, even if it's coming from someone with a reputation or someone with credentials as a doctor. Be careful. Only listen to verified sources. Many of us have conflict of interest, so that might affect. And Neelu mentioned correlation and causation, and most of these conclusions are unsupported. We saw that happening with hydroxychloroquine and many other modalities of treatment being touted as a miraculous cure in COVID. And some of these smaller trials might be presented as big data, but actually the sample size was small, 30 people in the study. And so that's not acceptable. Even if you look at vaccine data, previously all the trials had 8,000, 10,000 people. Now we have very large trial with 30,000, 60,000 people. So that is very reassuring. And sometimes the unrepresentative of the samples from the data, and all the selective reporting, cherry picking of data. And so we have to be a non-peer reviewed material, a blog post or journal article. We don't know which journalist wrote it and how many of the doctors that were being interviewed had good credentials. So you really have to know your sources very well. A lot of experts are now debunking misinformation online. If you're on Twitter, you can follow experts like this is a professor from Canada. He's very active on debunking misinformation. A lot of us are trying actively to debunk, give you credible information. And this is again, the anti-vaccine movement is getting some attention from the scientific field as well. Some of their claims have been debunked, so there are some political, both right-wing and left-wing people are in the anti-vax movement. So, hopefully we will get them into confidence soon, thanks to our scientists who are constantly trying to debunk their concerns. Yes, there are real concerns from that movement as well. So they will be engaged in a very positive and constructive fashion. And again, future of vaccine safety looks very promising. We will soon see cancer vaccines, which are going to be life-changing for a lot of us. And again, scientists can, because of the improvement in mRNA technology, vaccine development will again get more funding and more attention. So you're going to see probably, my hope is that you might see vaccines against tuberculosis, malaria, which are killing millions of people in the developing countries, India, Africa, etc. So that looks promising, because now there'll be more money pumped into this research because we know this technology works. And we can all be proud that we have been a big part of this movement. And I have to thank the millions of clinical trial volunteers and other people who have received the vaccine, volunteered to get the vaccine without waiting for others to get vaccinated, healthcare workers, of course, and the scientists. Okay, so yeah, at this point, we can move on to the Q&A section. Okay.
Thank you, Nishanti. That was super informative, and you've actually touched on all of the questions that have been pre-submitted. The only one, you probably briefly touched on this, but just for clarity, there was a question as to when public can expect to be vaccinated.
Yes, so I'm so glad this question is coming up at the end of the talk. I think most of us, almost everybody is now motivated and convinced to get the vaccine. Possibly summer, but I do have very strong faith and confidence in the provincial government and the federal government. And given that new variants are likely to arrive soon, probably, we are heavily dependent on the manufacturing capacity of Pfizer and Moderna at this point. But, by spring, we're going to see the Janssen vaccine. So probably we have secured enough doses. So probably summer and fall is when realistically we are going to see. But I think the seniors probably will be getting vaccinated soon after they finish vaccinating long-term care. But mind you, 3-4 provinces in Canada have already vaccinated all of their long-term care home residents. So this is very encouraging. We need to protect our more vulnerable people. But then for the economy to be fully opening and functioning, yes, there will be a big focus on essential workers and other frontline people. Yes. I'm sorry, I can't give you more because the things are changing so rapidly. They are working on it, right? Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just another question. You also touched on this one briefly. This is about the allergies. I believe you said there was going to be a form that you have to fill out when you're getting the vaccine, and it'll be taken care of, right?
Oh, yes. So individually they do ask, and yes, it's always the case. Even when you go to shoppers, because we all of us get flu vaccine. I've been getting the flu vaccine almost every year since I've been in Canada. Like, it's been like more than 10 years now. So when you go to get the flu shot, even our son gets the vaccine every year. He has never missed a dose. So or the flu vaccine, but when you go there, you have to do a questionnaire. But again, with the flu vaccine, there's concern about egg allergy and some interaction. But with the mRNA, and we saw that slide from Neelu, right? So there's hardly any product, but polyethylene glycol, that is the allergen in the vaccine. There's no adjuvant. So that is seen in a lot of food products too, interestingly. So I was reading a bit more about it. So it's there. And again, and another point was that in the US, when the trial, when they found some lip swelling, which was considered as like a partly anaphylactic reaction, this also happened in people who are taking Botox injections, as cosmetic reasons, Botox fillers for the lips, so they swell up. So it's probably not an allergic reaction per se, but it's like a local reaction. But they will watch you, but you don't have to be worried. And the other hesitancy is that a lot of people, interestingly, have needle phobia. People do want to take vaccine, but many people are scared of needle. Even adults, it does exist. So if you have that concern, you can talk to your doctor. If you're really anxious about the procedure itself, that you can take anxiety medication. It's totally agreeable. Your doctor might give you a small dose of anxiety medication, and then go ahead, and you don't have to be embarrassed about disclosing your anxiety. Do tell them. And because I've seen, especially young women or middle age, or even adults, sometimes they collapse having a vasovagal attack, syncopal attack, because of the anxiety itself. But if you are nervous, and if you think you want to avoid, if you think you will be embarrassed, so you can tell them, and there are measures available, and they'll help you with all that. Talk to your doctor as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So more people are sending in questions to me privately. I'll ask those, but I just want everybody to know, if you want to ask yourself, if it's easier for you to just raise your hand, you can do that as well and ask your question directly. So another question we have here is, due to the shortage of vaccines, is there a chance that you can get the first dose of the vaccine and not get the second one? And should this happen for whatever reason, what would be the possible issues that you have to foresee?
So it is possible. In the UK, there are some ongoing discussion around that. But this 95% efficacy they're talking about is based on two doses in that specific interval. So Canada has, I'm proud to say that ever since the pandemic began, everything we have done is based on evidence-based medicine only, not observational data, not on anecdotal evidence. So I'm pretty sure that Canadian data will be based on evidence-based medicine. That is coming from randomized controlled trials. So there will be more doses coming from Oxford and other sources. So I think we will always hope for the best and fight for the best possible scenario. Of course, unfortunately, if things change, then we might. But again, you do get some protection after the first dose. The protection is 50%, so it is acceptable.
Sounds good. And there's another question about the Covishield vaccine, the one that's currently approved in India. Is there any information you have about the efficacy of that vaccine?
Yeah, the Covishield vaccine is developed by AstraZeneca, and it is being manufactured by Serum Institute in Pune. So this was developed in the Oxford University, and of course, with the collaboration of Astra. But it is also, it is kind of similar to flu vaccine. It's kind of a vector vaccine, inactivated virus and all that. Again, very good efficacy actually. So in that, it is not a new technology. So most of, we do know about how these vaccines work. So Covishield is probably a safe option too. And they have been giving it to a lot of seniors, and there is good efficacy data as well. So it definitely looks reassuring. So the similar vaccine is one that is the one that I was talking about, the Janssen vaccine. It's a single dose, very similar to Covishield. So we will get that in Canada as well. So that one will be a human vector, not the adenovirus vector. Again, single dose. So watch for that. we're waiting for efficacy and safety data from that. So we will get something similar in Canada as well.
Well, that does sound assuring. So the next question is about the efficacy of the vaccine for new strains. I believe you mentioned in your presentation that it is still effective, but someone here is wondering if a new vaccine is being developed for the new strains, or if we're just going to stick to what we have.
I think no, it has not reached the manufacturing stage or the trial stage. They are working on tweaking and all that. So there are studies going on to see whether the available vaccine will prevent the variant or will provide immune response. But there is some concern about the South African variant. There are some real concerns there. Yeah, so as of now, everybody's optimistic.
Sounds great. Another question that we have is about the frequency at which you should be taking the vaccine. Is it going to be an annual thing, or do you take it once and you're immune for life?
We don't know. Again, there is some, it's not just the antibody response. We're talking about T cell response and all that. So probably long-term durability will be there. But in this case, we're talking about variants. In flu, every year that we see more new strains. So they're slightly different. Again, even nobody knows for sure, but there's also a possibility that this particular virus might become endemic, right? It'll become like everybody has developed immunity in one way or other. So there are all sorts of postulations. I honestly don't know.
Makes sense. We'll find out as things unfold. There's another question about Sinopharm vaccine or Sinopharm vaccine. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but if you can shed light on that.
Yeah, I haven't read up much on it. So it's mostly used in the Emirates, right? But even Dubai, I think they're mostly using Pfizer vaccine. But again, I don't think I can talk about it. I haven't read at all. I was mainly focusing on mRNA vaccine. So
no problem. You've already given us a lot of very helpful information. So that's all the questions that we've received so far. Is there anybody else in the audience that have any questions that has not already been answered in the Q&A or the presentation?
So I think there is a specific question about someone with autoimmune disease. In our group itself, I have posted a video from Dr. Nijal Haroon. So he has a PhD in immunology, and he's like a world expert in autoimmune diseases, and he's the vice president of Canadian Rheumatology Association. So very trusted resource, but my husband too. So definitely I will recommend Mubash to watch that video because it's a common audience. I don't refer to all this autoimmune condition, but he has very nicely covered all the autoimmune stuff there. It's in our group. So I will probably encourage Amina to share this with Mubash. So everything has been covered in that video.
Perfect. I guess as an extension to people with certain health conditions, are there like any such groups that should, specifically exercise more caution when they're considering getting the vaccine?
Not really, actually. The only absolute contraindication is the allergy, right? If anything, let's say if somebody has uncontrolled diabetes, or this is like a 70-year-old aunt or uncle with diabetes, my concern would be, this happens in the flu world too, like whether the vaccine efficacy is 100% or 95% in that population. So as of now, we don't know. We are optimistic that it'll give 90% protection in that population as well, but we will soon get subgroup analysis. So because diabetes itself is an immunocompromised state, or a little bit of inflammatory state, so we don't know whether so far in the trial there have been people with diabetes in the Oxford trial. So far they have done okay. Mind you, you might still get the disease, you might still get the viral infection after getting vaccinated. You might still, because none of this is 100% protective, right? So you might, let's say somebody with diabetes got only like a 75% protection, many of them, they might still get the disease, but what the vaccine prevents is your risk of severe disease and your risk of dying. That is the hard outcome we are trying to prevent. That's where the optimism is about. You are less likely to get hospitalized with COVID infection. You are extremely unlikely to die of COVID vaccine if you are vaccinated. With the natural infection, nobody can guarantee that. So that really is a beauty of vaccines.
Perfect. I believe Mushirbar had his hand up. Did you want to ask your question?
Hi, Amina. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, just a quick question. So children don't get the vaccine, right? So if we parents get vaccine and we are traveling to a country like India where most of the herd immunity hasn't kicked in, how do we protect our children then?
I mean, I think, can you mute yourself? Yeah. This is going to be sorry, I think you have to mute yourself. Okay, so this is going to be an ongoing concern because now, by spring, we are going to vaccinate our seniors. The young folks are not vaccinated yet, and everything is going to open up. So we're going to see more people coming down with COVID. This is being discussed as an emerging concern. Maybe, we might anticipate again a third wave due to that. So we have to be very, very cautious in that aspect. And again, putting us at risk of seeing new variants. So it doesn't look optimistic unless we have a good vaccine rollout system happening. So as far as travel, again, my concern is, we potentially we might see India is not, they have passed the peak, but we don't know. All it takes is one new variant. So I will be cautious in traveling till next fall, only because unless, there is, of course, many of us have parents and, family members that we desperately need to visit. That's a different scenario. But, what if you see a new variant and we don't know? There are still a lot of unknowns for children. Again, other than the natural other social distancing and all that, there's nothing more. They do transmit the disease. That really is a problem too, right? You go out, children get the disease and they might give it to your grandparents, your parents or senior members in the family. But again, I don't think we can 100% protect them in any ways.
Thank you, doctor. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So I don't see any other raised hands or any other questions. So I'll just give everybody another minute. This is a rare opportunity. It's not like you have an expert to answer your questions every day. So if there's any last questions, we'll take those as well. We'll be wrapping up in like another 5 minutes. So someone has asked about the video that you mentioned and has requested if a link to that video can be shared.
Okay, I will send it through WhatsApp. Is that okay?
Yes, that sounds good. So it looks like that's all the questions. Well, you did such an amazing presentation and answered most of the questions. So I guess that's why.
I just saw someone, Sean, we speak to him.
Yeah, I have.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the speed at which this vaccine was developed. Why is it that other vaccines take 7 to 8 years to develop, whereas this one was developed within 9 to 10 months?
So first reason is that it was the mRNA technology. So China published the genetic code of the virus in January, early January. Before he was being made the task force official, Dr. Anthony Fauci's team was already developing on a vaccine early January. I think by end of third week of January, the vaccine was developed. The vaccine was developed in the lab in 2 days. Unfortunately, what we should be complaining is that why did it take so long for the vaccine to be rolled out? Because we saw so many of our seniors dying in the absence of a vaccine. What they waited this long only to get the safety data and clinical trial data. The clinical trials usually, supposing I want tomorrow, so I have an Ayurvedic product and I want to test it in my diabetic patients, right? I have to first apply to the Health Canada, then I have to first apply, get their permission to actually import. I get the product from Kerala here, I get the export import, whatever license, and then I apply to the a hospital research ethics board. Then I get permission from them. It takes like 3 months to go through all these processes, easily 6 months to get the actual thing approved. Okay. And then I apply for funding. So that takes like 6 months to 1 year. And by the time I'm ready to roll out the trial, it's 1.5 years. And then I start rolling up patients. I have to convince the patients. Patients generally are not interested. They don't know about the side effects, and they're not concerned if it diabetes is mild. Nobody wants. I have to literally go out and give talks to invite people to join. So that takes another 6 months. So this is how the clinical, then I start collecting the data, the analysis, because I have to hire an analyst. It takes 6 months. And then I start compiling the data, and I work on my paper. It takes another 6 months. So this is how it gets extended. Then I submit it to a journal. They take like 6 months. It gets rejected, and it gets rejected. I submit to another journal. So this is how all the trial data get delayed, and and then it goes to another, before the product gets approved, I again go back to FDA or Health Canada, apply for an application and all that. With this, the pandemic was raging in the summer in the US, so people were aware that they had to, get involved somehow. It was very easy to recruit people because they saw the actual devastation happening, and billions of dollars or nearly $10 billion were pumped into vaccine research. And of course, all the regulatory processes were done in 2-3 months time. So they waited this long, unfortunately, to get the evidence. Otherwise, the vaccine was ready to be used probably by June or July. At the same time, when they started clinical trial, we could have easily used these vaccines in those hundreds of thousands of seniors who unfortunately died. We waited this long to get the safety data. Previously, this was what happening in the vaccine world, the funding and all that were, because nobody knew, right? Because this was a pandemic, everybody was willing to throw in money, and the vaccine manufacturers were already making vaccine. So this is why we were able to go through the and also these vaccines were highly efficacious. So we saw the outcomes because of the tremendous community spread. They could get the measured number of events within the stipulated time. So the trials could be completed. And also because of the internet and social media and technology, the data, big data, right? I think many of you work in analytics. So the data can be analyzed in lightning speed. So they could collect all the data simultaneously. It all happened, and I think thanks to capitalism also, with the dollars being pumped in, and technology, of course, I should thank, and also the volunteers.
Thank you so much. It actually brings us to 7:30 towards the end of the session, but I see that there's one hand up, so we'll take one last question if that's okay with you, Dr. Nisha.
Yep, sure.
Okay. So, Salim uncle, go ahead.
Thanks, Amina. And thank you, Nisha and Nigel and all the health workers for doing what you do. My question is, like, you touched on that, earlier in different ways, but my question is, like, since we are pretty much a global community, so, we get, we have relatives in different parts of the world, and, we get queries as to which vaccine is safe. And, we always respond saying that, in Canada, these 2 vaccines are approved, and, we will be taking it whenever it's available for us. So we try to reassure them that way. But in certain parts, like in the Middle East and in India, there are reports that certain vaccines has been pushed through. Especially in India, there was one vaccine where people were not the government kind of pushed through, like it's approved in a 3rd phase trial. So what do we tell them? Like, sometimes they don't have that option. So when they ask us, what would you suggest that we give an option? Like Sinopharm was one in the Emirates, where they say it's cheaper, so a lot of people are going for that. So what should we push for, if at all some query like that comes? Like, is there any vaccine that within the medical community there are concerns, and if there is it shareable, and can we put that out to the to our relatives? Because they're getting all this misinformation as well, so we don't want to perpetrate that, but at the same time we don't want to push them towards something unsafe.
Yeah, I guess, like, if we look at historically the vaccine data, right, the millions of people have received, and millions of children have received vaccines. And in general, of all the things we do, whether it's antibiotics or other cancer treatment or diabetes medications, or in general, our exposure to radiation in the community, all the junk food we eat, and even airplane, our risk of getting a problem, a random issue, or our risk of getting involved in a pedestrian accident, things like that. Vaccines have been considered a very safe, although unfortunately there is a lot of misinformation. Vaccines have been generally touted as a safe modality, and of course we are concerned about, because we are vaccinating normal people here, right? And that is the safety aspect. But as a scientist, as someone living in Canada, and I've had like epidemiological training in countries' top premier institutes such as University of Toronto, my mind says that we should definitely in parallel do clinical trials. It's very easy to do a clinical trial in India, because we have the numbers, right? People are willing to take part in clinical trials. So yes, because of the government facing challenges with control of the pandemic, and it's still a developing country, and we cannot do prolonged lockdown there as we do here. So the government has its own reasons to roll it out, but simultaneously I truly hope that they are doing clinical trials in a systematic fashion, so that at least the next set of people who are getting vaccinated will have all those answers. I won't be able to give you a definite answer because nobody knows, right? So we all know that really is the concern. But in general, the reason the Covaxin vaccine, the same company has developed vaccines using similar technology. Of course, all our previous vaccines have been based on Covishield and Covaxin based technology. So that's kind of giving them the confidence to roll it out as a feature. But again, we are talking about in an ideal world. Fortunately, we have seen how science was pushed in that fashion in USA and Canada. And I think we've been fortunate. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you so much. I guess that brings us to a close. Thank you so much, both to Dr. Neelu Feroz as well as Dr. Nisha Najal, not just for the presentation that was very informative today, but also for all the work that you do in the front lines during these very challenging times. We're all really, truly appreciative of it. And obviously, thank you to all of you who tuned in today. It's a lot of information, very dense information, but it's necessary that we stay abreast and keep our knowledge updated. So thank you for being here. So that's it until we reconnect with everybody at the next Tea Talk. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.